Welcome to Neurodivergency, where neurodivergent voices and friends turn struggle into strength. We're here to break the stigma around mental health, dive into the truth about our brains, and bring you real tools for clarity, healing, and hope. Today's guest is Angela Jamieson, a speaker, best-selling author, publisher, as well as a relaxed productivity advocate. Angela, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Such a pleasure. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Well, I am a former engineer, so I did have a wonderful engineering career that took me around the world. And now I'm in Canada where we came back to raise our family, and I knew I would have to reinvent myself. So I've just been learning along the way, and everything has been just something new, really different from engineering. But what I found, my first job when I got back, I did dive into engineering because that's easy for me. And at the time, it was, a big job, chief operating officer of a local consultancy. And I had young children, and my dad was sick. So in that crazy time, I just remember if you had asked me if I was burning out, I would just say no. I would say, this is just the way it is. I've got a big job, blah, blah, blah. And, but deep down, everything was just, I was just probably treading water, as they say. And when my dad passed away, it really brought mortality to straight in view for me, that I was like, what am I doing this for? And how come I'm doing emails on the weekend instead of spending time with my children? And that's when when he passed, I thought I'm going to quit my COO job and really dive into personal development and self-help. And by doing that, I sort of re-engineered myself from the inside out. And I developed a methodology called relaxed productivity. And that's what I want for everyone else as well. And along the way, I've had a book in my brain for 2 decades. And so I learned how to self-publish. I've now published 23 titles under a pen name, and I help other people publish their books as well. And this year I released my nonfiction book under my own name. So that was a lot of fun too. So that is another part of me that just sort of emerged by accident.
That is awesome. So before we dive into the books and everything that you do today, you've mentioned burnout already and being unaware of burnout creeping up, as well as kind of missing out on maybe some family time and high quality balanced work and life. Um, what what else was it that you were struggling with that got you into this um, new phase of personal development?
What was I struggling with? I think there was a lot of external validation that I was going for. There was a lot, and I think we're all raised like that because, we really feel good when our parents praise us. So we learn to look towards others for praise. And I think all through my life, it's been a little bit like that. Culminating in, when I did get the COO job, that is, a business card that's kind of cool. I've got a C-suite name for my job, and it looks impressive when you hand it out. And what I realized in those moments where everything was a tornado was that maybe my internal game wasn't up to par if I'm looking outside myself for approval or validation.
So I'm hearing a constant sense of I'm not good enough, and so chasing the next thing and wanting to be and look impressive for everyone and getting to a point where it never was satisfying on the inside. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think when you're always looking to what others want for you or what the world's metrics for success are, you never really look at the hard stuff. You never look inside to say, well, what is it really that I want? And I realized that I had been operating like that probably my entire life and wasn't really satisfying what was inside. I mean, it was probably 70-30 because, of course, we explore the areas that we're interested in, but really always looking for that external validation that everything's going okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I can relate to that, and I think a lot of people can, trying to chase happiness and fulfillment and approval from all those external things and achievements or experiences we have. Um, what else was there going on, if anything, that led to this inner journey?
I think, especially with my father passing away, it was, we are, none of us are going to be exempt from that when we lose our parents. And it was one of those wake up calls because when you're, especially in the teens and 20s, you're super selfish and you don't necessarily think about your parents. They're always there. And in the time that I was in that age, we didn't have internet, so we didn't keep in touch. We'd have phone calls. And when I started on my international career when I was 25, phone calls were expensive. So, every time I did call my parents, it was like they would wait for the update and then they would say, okay, well, that's good. Nice to hear from you because they wanted to get off the phone because it was costing so much. So we didn't they were just there and I would have to know that they were there. But when I was older and then got into, having children of my own and getting wrapped up in that world and still working, when he passed, it was one of those, oh, dang it. Like this is life. This is what happens to everybody. And when I looked back on his life, he was a he lived in China during the Japanese occupation and was living in Hong Kong at the time going to school because his parents were quite wealthy. But when the Japanese invaded, and he remembers walking to school, he was 6 years old, and bombs were falling around him, and they had to go undercover. And then he had to try to get back to his home village traveling only in the depths of night so that they weren't um, caught and surviving sometimes only on what he could find, which he says he often just got chicken feed that he would find in farmers' yards. So when he finally got back and they traveled by raft on the rivers, his mom took him up a mountain where they hid and they were gone for 2 years. So he had an interesting childhood. He was 2 years behind in school. When things settled down, he did go back to Hong Kong, where he had to work super hard to get the highest marks. There's thousands of people trying to get hundreds of positions at the university, and he got a scholarship. He wouldn't have been able to do that because they had lost everything. And then eventually coming to Canada to do his higher degrees. So you know, he had a wonderful tenured professor position and lived a wonderful life in a way that I could live a better life. And then suddenly, it's all over. His story on earth was suddenly over. Speaking to him one night, knowing he wasn't doing very well, but then he's gone. That was a real wake up call for me that I really needed to refocus and say, what is important to me? What do I want out of my life? Because at some point, it's going to be over as well.
Yeah, definitely is a big wake-up call, the death of a family member. I remember one of the precursors to my second episode of the psychiatric hospital um, was the death of my grandma. And it was actually the death of the first family member that I had ever experienced. Um, it wasn't like immediately the effects of the death led to um, the episode, but it was certainly a factor that was adding some kind of stress or emotional load in the background. And so it makes total sense that this would be a huge wake-up call. And yeah, so I heard in there that you were either feeling unfulfilled or you were questioning the amount of fulfillment and happiness that your life had been giving you up until that point. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think, in world terms, I was fulfilled. Like I had enough money, I had the title, I had a wonderful, healthy family, nice place to live, all of those things. But I think deep down, when you're in the quiet of your own soul, you're sort of like, is this what life is all about? Is this what I do until I retire? And then what do I do after that? When your focus is so solely on work, that it just really made me question, there's got to be something deeper to this life. There's got to be something more because this just feels so superficial.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think we all have that force within us that is that is seeking to help us be more fulfilled. And if that's the path that it must take to have this wake up call, then so be it. I'm curious to know, in contrast now, unless there's anything else you want to add about the preconditions, what does life look like now?
Yeah, life right now is pretty different. I'm not doing a corporate job anymore, but that is a purposeful choice, that one that you don't have to make. Because when I realized that I can engineer myself from the inside out, I realized that life is really, I can do anything I want. I can be whoever I want. It's just the thoughts that I keep thinking that keep me stuck in the track that I was in. I think it's Dr. Joe Dispenza who often says either 60 or 90,000 thoughts a day, of which 95% are what we thought before. So we keep ourselves in our own paradigm of existence. If we could change our thoughts, like today, I could tell you I'm an artist. I'm not. But, I could if I wanted to follow that. And so we can be whoever we want. And when I learned, that our beliefs are just thoughts we keep thinking, I realized that there were a lot of things that I had just kept myself in. And it goes to what we were talking before of the external validation. I realized I didn't need that. I need to figure out what is important to me and to relentlessly pursue that. And what that really means in the end is I want to live a fantastic, amazing life full of great experiences. I want to taste life. I want to savor life. I want to get that deeper meaning to life. And what I found, especially about the beliefs and your thoughts and your inner diagnostics, which are your emotions, I just feel limitless. I feel like I can do whatever I want.
That is an amazing feeling and an incredible mindset to have. How did you realize that your thoughts were your beliefs which created your life? I mean, where did you get these epiphanies? You mentioned Joe Dispenza already as one resource. Was that the key thing, or were there other either precursors or catalysts to it?
My main source of inspiration is kind of a weird source, but it's Abraham Hicks. And it is weird from the point of it's this woman, Esther Hicks, who is able to, I guess, translate. She gets thought forms from universal intelligence. And I know it sounds really weird and woo. And I was just like, this is too weird, but I'm just going to listen to it for like 2 minutes. And if I don't like it or if it feels weird at all, because I'm very logical, then I'm going to just turn it off. So when I listened to it, it was just full of love. It was full of, let me answer your questions for you to anyone that came to their hot seat. And I was almost addicted to listening to it. Of course, there are a lot of mentors that are in the personal development space. But since we're all really fallible in terms of human, there were a lot of things that I learned from others that I don't want. So there's a lot of people who are telling you to do life a certain way, but then in the parts that they don't show you, their personal life might be falling apart. So then you look at the holistic you, and it's like, well, if they're telling me to do it this way because they did it, but their marriage broke up, I really don't want that. That I don't want all of their life. So what I really liked what Abraham Hicks says is you got to figure this out for yourself. And there is no right way. There is a right way for you, and you choose. You have the ability to choose what you want for your life and then just make it right for you. So that is the basis of what I developed to be relaxed productivity methodology with added science. So my tagline is where science meets spirit, because I like to use the science to back up what what I've learned. And because what I love about science, and that's what enabled me to have an international career, is that science is the same everywhere. It's not like I was going to be an accountant. Thank goodness I didn't do that. But you wouldn't be able to move around the world because all tax laws, they're all different. Whereas with engineering, and I know that there was some sort of guidance in that because just before applying for university, I was going to go for accounting and I thought, oh, something feels off. I have to go figure out what I should be. And for the first time walked into the guidance counselor's office in high school, and she put me through an aptitude test which said engineering, engineering, engineering. And I didn't even know what it was. But when I found out, and I do love math and I do love science, I thought I'm going to give it a go. And that enabled me to have this international career that I knew I wanted from a child. Because my dad, who I mentioned was a professor, we lived globally whenever he had a sabbatical. So every 7 years, we would go and live in another country while he did his research. So I knew from a young age that I also wanted to live and work overseas. And I just think there was some sort of universal guidance that made me question my accounting choice. So it's all of that that is so cool to me. And this is sort of where I layer in Joe Dispenza because he does so much in terms of experiments on, the quantum field, and everything is becoming more sciency. Everything is getting closer to being within our reach through equations. We're not quite there yet, but you know as well, when there's a scientific paper, it's often talking about a discovery that was made maybe 2 years ago, but it had to go through all this peer review, all of this, did you do the experimentation right? So whatever news we're hearing is always old news. And so there's a little space in between what humans recognize as truth to what is actually going on. And that's where science meets spirit. That's where I exist. And I try to translate that for my more logically minded, relaxed productivity people in my world.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You covered a lot of topics, so
Yeah,
um
sorry.
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the spiritual piece because we're so conditioned to believe in this material world where if it's not measurable or quantifiable or I don't know, perceivable, then it doesn't exist and you must be delusional. When actually a lot of wisdom traditions and a lot of previous, I don't know, prior to the scientific methods, there was a lot of myth making and trying to make sense of the world because there's a space where we have not figured out and we still haven't figured out. And to a certain extent, quantum physics is attempting to bridge that gap, but even the quantum physicists among themselves have lots of different theories about the basic nature of reality and consciousness. Meanwhile, here we are as human beings living with struggles and lack of purpose and burning ourselves out and having to deal with traumas like family members dying, and we don't have an understanding to make sense of it. And that's, I think, where spirituality has to come in, is to fill that gap that science has not yet figured out. And it may figure it out eventually, but meanwhile, to deal with your problems in the here and now, you have a spiritual solution which is accessible. And there are many, many spiritual traditions that have approached the same exact problems through different angles and with different language. So it's just about finding the thing that corresponds to you. And yeah, for you, it seemed to have been that Higgs as a catalyst. And I'm curious to know, how do you integrate the spiritual into the productivity in the current day, and how does it help people?
Yeah, so for a lot of logical people, the spirit part is a little bit out there. They can't quite get there, even though we know everything that we can see, hear, and touch is made out of atoms that we also can't see. So it seems like especially logical people need that proof. But when I can talk about science or spirituality concepts that are consistent, then that kind of bridges the gap. And that's what bridged the gap for me as well. And a lot of the things, for instance, when I learned about the importance of emotions, that was the biggest craziness that I was just like, okay, I need to stretch to learn about these emotions, but it seems like it's consistent around the world. And that's what really attracted me. I did grow up in the church, but what always bothered me was that, say, our pastor would say, you must do this in order to be saved. Everyone who doesn't do this, or maybe outside our church walls, will, go to hell or not be saved. And for me, when you look out into the world and you say, man, there's so many other religions, and it looks like that person, they don't go to church, but they're doing pretty good, so there was so much conflict in what I could understand. And it was just, so I have to just listen to what you say and then I'll be okay. But what about those other people who are listening to other people? And yeah, seem to be doing fine. So it was one of those,
Blasphemous people.
yeah. But when you talk about the consistency of, I guess the universe is the easiest way to put it, and what most people talk about it as, and how your emotions are your beacon for success. Oh, it makes so much sense. And so that's what I love teaching. It's kind of teaching the craziness through logic. And that's also what I tell people I do.
That makes so much sense. And it's really about bridging those gaps between the current belief and a belief that would suit better. I really want to dive into the emotions piece as well. But before that, I want to ask you, you've mentioned already a couple of big things: spirituality, um, emotions. Are there any other big tools or milestones that you've come across that led you to where you are?
I think the other piece of that is realizing the beliefs and how transient they are. I thought they were, your beliefs are your beliefs, your values are your values. They will never stray. But just with science, just when you look at science, and I equate, there's a belief cycle that I I adapted, but it just makes, I don't know if it's actually anyone else, but beliefs, you know, give rise to certain thoughts, give rise to emotions, then you have a certain action, which gives an outcome that supports that belief. That's very similar to the scientific process, where, you have a hypothesis, you test it, there's an outcome, and it either reinforces that current scientific belief or not. This is just how we work. And that's why it's interesting how some people in the personal development field will say, this is science backed. But the way they say it is equivalent to this is fact. Whereas science is constantly evolving. Like
Yeah,
just, remember when they thought the earth was flat. Of
I
course, there
was
are still
just thinking
people,
about that.
yeah,
Yeah, I was
there are still
literally, I
people
don't know
who
if,
think about that.
yeah, te telepathy right there. Because I was just thinking,
Wow.
the world is flat is scientifically validated
Yeah,
from some time ago. So, number one, what does that say to you today? Uh, if something says that it's scientifically validated, you still have a degree of uncertainty.
yes,
There's no such thing as proven. I mean, it proven is relative. Of course, there is such a thing when we have a certain range of confidence. Maybe we can say 99% confidence, or we can say we're 99.9999999% confidence. But yeah, there's always that uncertainty, and I think that's the really advantageous thing about going deep into questioning things, particularly if you're very logical, analytical. You're always going to find evidence that could support either way. Now the question is, how do you weigh the evidence, and how does that compare to your beliefs, which is
that's right.
actually the thing that's going to affect your life.
I think it's that, 0.000001 that as a scientist, as an engineer, that's the exciting part. That's like, what else do we not know about this? We think we know something, but can you imagine when they realized the Earth was round? Like that must have, that mind-blowing emoji must have been going off everywhere. Like, you know, or,
Yeah.
that the earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around. Like all of that is crazy. Well, mostly because they discovered that ages ago and they were amazing scientists without all of the data collecting abilities that we have now. But it's that for me is the exciting part is that for people who are super logical that need it to be shown to them is like there is still a little bit of uncertainty around this. So can we get excited that there might be something different than what you currently accept? And, even if we look at, for instance, our beliefs, and I'm going to go tread in some dangerous waters, but political beliefs, and you just go, this is the way it is, there is someone else in the world who thinks exactly opposite to you and thinks you're the crazy person. So who is right? There's
Yeah.
just so many degrees of freedom that we need to understand exist. So choose the one that works for you. Choose the one that forwards your life and hang on to that. Like I said before, you can be whoever you want. So if you want to wake up and be a victim to your past trauma, you can do that. If you want to wake up and say, today is a new day, that trauma doesn't affect me, you can do that too. It's all what are we telling ourselves? What stories do we want to stay in and dwell in?
Absolutely. And this relates a lot to diagnoses. Whether you are diagnosed with something or not doesn't change your actual lived experience. What it is that does change your lived experience is what you believe about the diagnosis. If you believe it's a good thing, a helpful thing, then it might be helpful for you. If you believe it's a negative thing, something holding you back, it might be reinforcing a negative thought pattern cycle. If you have an experience in which you transcend all of that and identify with something that's not mind, the body, all of this kind of deep spiritual, mystical experience, that's even another thing. And all of these experiences are shaping our beliefs. So I'm curious to know if someone who is listening right now has some beliefs that are holding them back, or they're not sure if they have beliefs that are holding them back or not, but they suspect that they might, what would you tell them in order to make the investigation and confirm or change it up?
Yeah, so that is the biggest question in terms of how we can improve ourselves. And there's a really easy answer because we have to listen to our internal diagnostics, and those are our emotions. So if you are plodding through life and you get a negative emotion, stop right there and take a look at it. And that is often revealing a limiting belief. Because if someone says, for instance, in a corporate world, Angela, okay, it's your turn to do a presentation. You've got 5 minutes. And you go, ugh, this feels horrible. And what am I going to, there's just that immediate horrible feeling. And the limiting belief there would be, I'm not prepared. What are they doing? I'm not good enough. What am I even doing at this table? So imposter syndrome or whatever that highlights, some deeper thinking that you have instead of, getting up and saying, sure, thank you very much for, and then do you take the stage and you talk about stuff because you know what they're talking about. So all of those, you can see how your mindset about the situation really carries you through or it stops you. And the difference between that is your emotion. So I always tell people, don't go looking for your limiting beliefs. Just let them emerge. Because if you go look and you go look into trauma and you say, oh, my dad, he used to like say bad things to me, like you're just looking for it. Does it affect you today? If it doesn't, then it's like, it's okay. It's part of your story. I had a very old-fashioned Chinese dad, and I grew up in a Western world. So there was huge differences in the way he thought. Do I let that hold me back? No. It's like I am so grateful for the blessings my dad gave me in the way that he could. So where am I going to take it from now? Now it's my turn to take my learnings and and grow my life, make a bigger impact. And it's not even about the impact, it's about just living a happy, glorious life. Because when you do that, you make an impact. But that shouldn't be your goal. If you hear what I'm saying, don't do it for others, you do it for yourself.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's a big insight to follow the emotions and use them as diagnostic, internal diagnostics, as you were saying. How did you, how were you able to come to those conclusions? And how can we help people become more aware of their emotions or value their emotions more?
Yeah, that's a great question and something I've pondered for a while because engineers tend to be pretty emotionless. And I remember going through my corporate life as I was learning the ropes and doing a lot more business planning. And I felt like the process was taking the emotion out of me because I was coming to the base belief that I must keep my emotions out of business because that makes for very bad business decisions. So I stopped feeling emotions when I was at work. But then when I created business cases, I realized I can manipulate the numbers however I want in order to make a business case look better or worse. There's so many different layers you can do. You can like rank it low, you can put the probability of success low or extremely high, and then you make the outcome better. So to me, there was this like, well, then what's the point of also being totally logical? Because I can manipulate that too. And what I find with a lot of the clients that I get who are from a science-backed background is that they have been trained out of their emotions as well. And what I want to do is bring that back for them. And what we do is just practice feeling happy. I know that sounds weird, but when you feel happy, really talk it up. Like, why are you enjoying this ice cream right now? What do you love about it? And it's just really taking your emotions super high. Like, when you're there, just dwell in it. And it's kind of a really weird retraining, but it's so essential. If you want to squeeze the essence out of your life, you need to be able to feel. And you also need to be able to not be afraid of bad emotions. What we always say with negative emotions, it's like the gas gauge on your car. You're just empty. So instead of putting a negative emotion to an empty gas tank and you're worried about like, oh, if I just didn't go to that grocery store one last time, I wouldn't be empty. No, you don't say that. You just say, oh, I'm getting empty. I better fill it up. So when we feel that negative emotion, it's just like, okay, I got to do something about this. And catching that as a diagnostic and not as an emotion, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, it makes absolute sense, and I totally relate. Being an engineer myself, I think I've always been into the logical and not really seeing the value in emotions. And I think part of that is also societal conditioning, where we're very much conditioned to believe, yeah, the science and the mathematics and whatever are valuable skills, what jobs do people recommend? Be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. It's there is this sort of anti-artist, anti-creative, I don't know, history kind of conditioning that we have on a global consciousness scale, but actually it's perhaps a big part of the problem.
Yeah, and if you look at we had our school board, is low in funding and stuff. So their first decision is to cut music. So it's one of those arts and all the creative stuff that's seen as a little bit disposable. So that's also another thing I like to tell people is if you have a museum in your city, go for a tour and get someone to explain the reason behind that piece of art. And I remember the first time I did that because we have an amazing museum here and it's modern art. I'm not really well versed in modern art, but I went for a tour and the way they described, the meaning behind the pieces, a lot of them, my husband says, I've got all of that in my garage. So I can, but it's not, it's what holds it together, what makes it meaningful is all of the emotion, the thought, the essence behind that piece of art, which might just look like a pile of screws. Um, but when you feel that, you can't even explain it. There's just like, I get you. I understand you. And your souls, it feels like, talk to each other. You relate to the artist on a totally different level. And that's so beautiful. And that's what I really want, especially logical people like I was and you as well, to really don't go through life without feeling that because oh, it's so deep, it's so rich. It's it's like makes you want to scream from the mountaintops or a grassy knoll since I'm in the prairies here that life is so beautiful. Life is worth living and it just makes you want to create everything beautiful in your life.
That is amazing. And it's an incredible place to be, to have so much gratitude just for existing and for life itself. And I think that piece related to, why is it that music gets deprioritized in school, and why is it that we're cut off from emotions, is the part that I think spirituality addresses that science hasn't yet fully understood. Yes, we know a lot about emotions. We have emotional intelligence. We know they're related to trauma and healing. We know our subjective experience, but from an existential perspective, there's a lot that we don't know yet.
Yes, and I think the whole what I've been learning about trauma, of course, I'm not certified in anything, but people who have experienced that, they say that, the typical Western approach to trauma is let's sit down and talk about it. Tell me about it. And it's just like you're telling people to relive their trauma just to inform you. Whereas sometimes the biggest healing comes from doing art, from doing movement, from listening to music, creating music, because that touches a piece of your soul that is so magical that you don't have to explain yourself. It's just beautiful that if you can, just grasp a whiff of that beauty, that your trauma starts to heal and you start to see the beauty of life again. So, yes, taking away the arts, taking away creativity is removing resilience. It's removing that extra layer of, I guess you would say, spirituality, energy from what really creates us as full humans, not just 2D versions that are very logical.
Not just a cog in the machine, if we will, the
Mhm.
the matrix of society machine, but
Exactly.
actual fulfilled, happy human beings.
Exactly.
I love it. So we've talked so far about major pieces related to our beliefs, spirituality, our emotions, a little bit about trauma. I'd love to know more about relaxed productivity. What does that entail? And can you walk us through it?
Yeah, so currently I have an online course which sort of is the intro to the basics of relaxed productivity thinking. So we go through what, your mind, body, spirit, or mind, body, energy, and just explain the different ways you can optimize those parts of you to, equal a better life. So the first time I ran it, at the end of the course, people said, we want to talk about this more. We need to just have more discussion because it was new to them. And so I started my membership. And so my membership has been going for about a year and a half. It's just been amazing. And all that is I teach them something every month and we get together 2 times a month because usually people are busy, they're busy professionals. I don't give huge homework. I give them things to think about. And then we hash out uh things twice a month because by just showing up, they don't have to prepare anything. They just learn and we discuss and we share experiences and try to solve real life issues as a group. And most of these people have been with me from the beginning. So they are amazing and they have the relaxed productivity thinking down pat. So they will often make suggestions to the others with their problems. And it's just bang on. It's like, well, how do you feel about this? And so what is this telling us? And let's rebuild it so that your mindset is stronger.
Interesting. So, if I understood correctly, it's something along the lines of looking at productivity from a holistic perspective with mind, body, spirits, and optimizing it with certain learnings, certain mindsets in order to achieve more, but with a um, let's say compassionate self-care elements, like not overdoing it, but rather using it as a way of growing internally, emotionally, and spiritually at the same time.
Yeah, and it's the biggest thing is to redefine productivity for ourselves. So the first time I ran the course, one man said, "So what you're telling me is the product in productivity is me." And I was just like, that is perfect because we need to really ask ourselves, what are we being productive in? And is it important to us? And it's natural that we think work is important to us because, when you're growing up and you're going through school, that's what everyone's saying is, what are you going to be when you grow up? And that's such a focus. We don't have kids yet, so then you do work. When you start having kids, forget to change that mindset. You're just focused on work because now you have to provide for all these people. But it's, are we being productive in creating moments with our children, with our partners? How many sunsets have you watched this week? Those kind of things is find the productivity markers that add up to a life that you want. So it's really defining what success means for you. But also when I say about we're going to do less so that you can do more. And that is in part, let's drop our limiting beliefs. Let's drop everything that holds us back, the resistance we have to the life we want. And in doing that, it frees us up. Because what I learned about burnout in studying various people and knowing people that I've worked with is like some people are so capable. They can handle so many jobs and they still have a smile on their face. And there's some people who maybe are in charge of a tenth of what the other person is doing and they fall apart. So the difference that I found is the way we carry our thoughts. So if we can just drop everything that weighs us down, we will actually become more productive in all areas of our life. So if we can redefine that, we will actually live fuller, and deeper lives.
Love how you've really stripped that down and reframed productivity, not just about achievements in work, but also achievement in personal life. And this is a hugely important topic, I think, because we definitely have this belief that productivity should be about work and about maximizing things rather than finding the balance and rather than the other aspect that I caught from that was also redefining success not as what other people or society are telling us or conditioning us to believe that success is, but rather by your own internal metric of what does success in life mean to you. And that kind of brings it back to the beginning, your origin story of being unfulfilled and burning out.
Yeah, because at the end of it, you want to live a life that you're proud of. Your boss, hopefully, is not going to be beside you on your deathbed rating your performance. It's going to be you. It's going to be you and your loved ones. So redefine that before you have regrets. So that is one of the first things that I do with my clients is like take them through what's called the deathbed exercise. Is like, what are you going to regret if your life ended today? What are your regrets? And then we go to addressing those. And you find that it's usually, well, 100% never about work. It's about the stuff that really means something to them that they're thinking, oh, that'll be there tomorrow. Stuff like your family, your hobbies, your fitness, all of that. Oh, I can still catch up on that. But what if you can't? What if you can't? So what I find is, and we also talk about this as well, our different minds that we have, my theories on our different minds, and our connection to the universe, which can be our soul, our spirit. We are born with that focus. So when we're little kids, we can take everything. We're so curious. And only through life that starts to get, we start to close off that part of us because we're faced with jobs, we're faced with mortgage, we're faced with, you know, just worldly things. And it's only when you get older, if you are blessed to actually get older, that you look back on your life with that same universal view of like savoring the moments, of being with your family. So a lot of times I get people to slow down to say, just add in a few of those moments in your day. I call that mind your sage mind. So what I tell them to is sprinkle the sage, just like you do in a recipe, is like sprinkle a bit of sage into your day. And even if that's all you can do, that's that 1% change that will compound to a happier life than what you're doing right now.
I love it. Absolutely. And I'm curious now that you've mentioned the sage. When I hear sage, I think archetypes. Is that something that you work with or integrates into your system?
No, I haven't looked into that yet.
Just the
Um,
one.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I know there's a lot of archetypes that people talk about, but to me, the simpler, the better. Is you don't
Yeah.
have to try to put yourself into a personal development box. It's just like know your diagnostics, keep a tab on your emotions and go for what feels right. But also having the higher awareness that when things go wrong, those are wonderful times too, because we are exploring, we're creating this life. So when things go wrong, you're learning something. You are finding out what you don't like. So everything bad in our life is actually good. So there's just so many facets to this. I'm sorry, I'm throwing so many ideas at you,
No,
but
that's great. I love it.
yeah, it's just like life is so rich once you get to know these different layers and know how to read yourself so that, yeah, the archetype is for people who need a little bit more logic and more definition of what box you're in, go ahead. But I'm just trying to force people to focus on themselves. Who are you and what do you want to become? And projects, you and I know as engineers, we start with where are we right now? Where do we want to be? And then you figure out your way there. And that's exactly what I want people to think about. We don't think about what's our past because what's important is who we are today and what do we want to become.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's very similar to a lot of the stuff that I teach actually. It's funny you mentioned that there's no such thing as a bad experience because the bad leads to learning, and learning leads us to better things. Partly because either we can grow our skills in order to not be so bad, or we can avoid those things that we find are bad. But actually, the most fundamental thing behind all of that is the looking inwards and observing those things that we find good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, and using that as internal diagnostics to guide us to where we want to go. And everything
Yeah,
else, I suppose, is just tools and ways to get there.
yeah,
Knowledge,
exactly.
practice, and tools.
And I tell I guess I'll call them clients or students, that life isn't about avoiding, you are going to crash and burn sometimes. But what I'm teaching them is so that they do a controlled crash and burn, that they know exactly that I have a risk of crashing and burning, and I'm going to celebrate that crash and burn because I know exactly how to rebuild after it. And I know my rebuild after that is going to be even better because of what I learned from the crash and burn.
That is an amazing mindset to have or cultivate. Super cool. As we get towards the end of the conversation, I'm wondering, Angela, is there anything, topic, subject, point you want to emphasize that either you haven't mentioned yet or you want to, yeah, drive home for this conversation?
Well, I would love to mention my book that I wrote. It's called Using Number Two to Get to Number One. So it's a super fun book.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is. I talk about crap. I talk about the digestive system, but it's like living a great life with the metaphor of your digestive system. So when we talk about emotions, I've got that in there as well, because well, I guess the easiest example is for emotions. I noticed as a kid when my emotions turned nervous, I would have to go to the bathroom. So they actually affect us physiologically, but also I was trying to stress the emotions, looking at the importance of emotions in your life. So inside the book is a lot of what I talk about against the metaphor of the digestive system, just for fun, because I actually think about crap way too much.
That is a funny thing to end on. If you had to summarize, what would someone like me or the listener get out of reading this book in one or two sentences? What would that be?
I would hope that you would get out that the gift is you, that you are so perfect that you don't have to live up to anyone else's expectations. It's just you, and especially your audience who you talk about neurodivergency. All of that is such a gift. It's like, what are you thinking about that it's it's so different from how everyone else thinks. What is the gem in there and what can you bring to the world? I'm so excited whenever someone thinks a little differently because I always learn something. I just go, that's so fascinating. So do that for yourself and say, what is fabulous me going to accomplish today? And then go out and do it with wild abandon. Because when you follow your heart's bliss, you will never hurt anyone else. No one else can have an impact on you either. So just go and create this world that works for you. It's beautiful.
Wow, what a powerful message to land on at this end of the show. Such an incredible chat, Angela. Thank you so much for your time, energy, wisdom, inspiring story, practical tools, and resources. Of course, if anybody would like to connect with Angela and or check out any of Angela's offerings, the links will be in the show notes. Angela, is there anything that you would want to say to a listener as far as getting in touch with you or otherwise?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn if you look me up there, or my website. I try to keep it up to date, but sometimes life gets in the way, and so I'm okay with that. But I try to put all of my latest offerings there as well. And it's just been a complete honor to be able to talk to you today and maybe get exposed to your audience. I really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure, Angela. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.